Moving forward to lesson 4 of this unit 2 of American history, we're going to be talking about social and cultural tensions. So, some things we have talked about, I'll review here at the beginning. But when you think social, we're talking about daily life, and cultural, you're talking about ways of life. So, you're going to notice these two are going to kind of overlap. So, again, today we're going to be talking about causes, we're going to be talking about effects. Just make sure you're pulling those out. That's very, very important in American history. So you're going to notice that the effects of what's happening in the 20s are going to cause people to really question what they determined like fundamental in their life. And I'm going to be talking about that as we go. So going into things we've already talked about, we talked about prohibition. We talked about in lesson 3, talking about wets versus dries. This would be a social clash. So where this all kind of comes back into this lesson is that this divided the nation pretty much right down the middle. So, question number 1, true or false? The topic of prohibition caused no social conflicts. So, other social clashes that we talked about is nativist versus immigration. So, where we talked about this was in lesson 1, where we talked about Sacco and Vanzetti and the KKK and all their targets, I guess you would say, or the KKK's targets of immigrants now, along with African Americans and such. So why this all matters is that this is going to create tension with immigrants that are coming into the United States still by the boatloads because World War One left them homeless. So that would be a social conflict. So question number 2, true or false? The topic immigration caused no social conflicts. So this is a new one. So this is going to be called traditionalism versus modernism. So here's where I'm going to use two separate words: rural and urban. Urban meaning cities, rural meaning countries. And this is where you're going to see a dramatic shift in American history. It is in the 1920s where more people are now living in cities than in the country. So this is going to be a big difference because we're a country where we founded on settling the West. Notice that people were bringing their talents of farmers with them from the old world, and this is where they're going to set up. Well, now everybody's moving to cities and they're going to be finding jobs in businesses, factories, and for example. And you're going to notice that this way of life is going to cause a clash here in a little bit. So, where this is kind of working to the point is you got to look at education. So, education in the country is a little bit different than education in the city, and it's because they're preparing you for your next step. So, during this time in cities, you needed to know a little bit more about a lot more things, to simply say it. And then in the country, you just need to know the basics because most likely you're going to go into farming at this point. So you can see the difference between the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then you're going to notice that the urban side is going to get into a little bit more science, if you will, talking about why things happen, how they happen, so on and so forth. So you're going to see the shift by the 1930s is going to cause people to not only go to high school more, but then graduate from high school more and then move on to college. And this is kind of a not common thing during the time. So here's my question. In 1920, more people lived on farms than in cities. True or false? So, working a little bit more to the point is that you have to keep in mind also in the 1920s, going into the 1930s, people still lived a very traditional and fundamental way of life. So, what I mean by that is religion. So, during this time, religion is still a pretty common thing. But in other parts of the world, it's under attack. So, in the new countries, Soviet Union, when Russia dropped out of World War One, they became Soviet Union, not Russia anymore. They're actually going to do away with a lot of their churches. So Christianity was kind of under attack. And with all the problems that prohibition was still kind of kicking up in the 1920s, people said they need to return back to the good book, if you will. Go back to the way that God made them want it to be. So you're going to notice that people are going to interpret the Bible almost literally on how to act. And this is going to hit a major problem. And this is the major problems. John Scopes. So he's going to be a teacher in rural Tennessee, and he is a science teacher. He is somebody that believes in evolution. He is somebody that's going to break the law against teaching against the Bible. So, what does he do? He tells everybody that man has evolved from monkeys, and kind of going with Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, if you will. So, where this now hits a big snag is that in the small town of Tennessee, Dayton, Tennessee, at this point, it's against the law to do that. So, he's basically saying the Bible is not true because Adam and Eve weren't the first men. We evolved from it. So, this is two very different things. So, what's going to happen is that John Scopes is going to go on trial, and he's actually going to be found guilty for teaching against the Bible, and he's actually has to pay a fine of $100, which is about $1,100 in 2022 conversion ish. But again, you see this clash is going to be a problem. So, my question for you is pick a statement that best fits the Scopes trial clash.